The recording begins at 06:14:03 station time. That is what the timestamp says when senior analyst Veth Caron first plays it back in the observation bay. She has watched the footage 11 times by now. She will watch it 40 more before the council session ends. Every time she watches it, she sees something new. Every time, her certainty about what she thought she understood about the human species erodes another degree, like a riverbank giving way in slow collapse. The child enters the enclosure at 06:14:03. She is small, even by human standards, and Veth Caron has reviewed enough of the species' biological files to know their baseline metrics. This one is small. 8 years of age according to the acquisition manifest. 41 kilograms, 119 centimeters. Hair the color of dry sand, pulled into 2 uneven bundles at either side of her head. She wears a gray thermal suit, 2 sizes too large, the sleeves rolled to her elbows. She carries nothing. The council's directive specified nothing. She does not know when she enters what the enclosure is. That is in the design. The enclosure is 40 meters wide and 60 meters long, with a domed ceiling that simulates a forest interior, diffuse light, the smell of soil and cold pine, a recorded ambient track of wind through branches that Veth Caron's team spent 3 weeks calibrating, so it sounded exactly like the wilderness recordings the acquisitions team had made on the human homeworld. There is a stream. There are boulders. There are actual trees, grown from seed stock collected on the acquisition run. The design team was thorough. They spent more effort on the trees than they did on thinking about the child. Veth Caron does not say this in the council session, but she thinks it. She has been thinking it since the 42nd hour, when the anomaly became undeniable. The child enters. The door behind her seals. She stands still for a moment, looking up at the canopy, and then she does something none of the 22 analysts in the observation bay expected. She pulls a small device from inside her sleeve. They scan it immediately. It is a personal recorder, a human child's toy, essentially. A flat rectangle the size of a playing card, with a single optical lens and a talk-activated microphone. Something she had concealed in her clothing during the transfer, missed in the processing sweep because it read as a non-threat, which it was, in every physical sense. But the analysts had not considered what a child might do with such a thing. They learn, over the next 62 hours of footage, exactly what she does with it. She holds it up, points it at her own face, and says, "Day 1, I'm in some kind of forest room. Gravity feels a little lighter than home. The trees smell right, but the wind is on a timer. You can tell because it does the same thing every 11 minutes. I'm going to call this the forest room. There's a stream, and I think there's something else in here, but I haven't seen it yet." She pauses. "If anyone finds this, my name is Mara Elkin. I'm 8 years old and I live in Sutherland, Montana, and my dad's name is Joel Elkin, and he has a red truck. If you find this recording, please give it to him." Then she puts the recorder back in her sleeve and begins to walk the perimeter of the enclosure. Methodically, she runs her hand along the wall as she walks, checking for seams. She stops at 3 points to press her palm flat against the surface and push, then kneel and examine the base junction between wall and floor. She finds the ventilation grill in the northeast quadrant, crouches in front of it, and spends 4 minutes simply listening to it. In the observation bay, nobody speaks for 6 minutes after this portion of the footage plays. It is researcher Paul Don who finally says, "She's mapping the space." "She's 8 years old," says Council Director Ethan Moule. "Yes," says Paul Don, "and she's mapping the space." The subject of the experiment is not the child. This is what Veth Caron has to keep reminding herself and reminding the council as the session drags into its second day. The experiment was never about the child. The child was a variable, a controlled stimulus. The subject of the experiment, the thing they were measuring, The data they were trying to collect is Keth. Keth is the albino. In 17 years of observation, across 12 different pack structures across 3 continents of the acquisition world, the Hegemony's Xenobiology Division has documented exactly 9 albino specimens of the species the humans call asterisk wolves. The albinos are invariably larger, invariably more aggressive, invariably the first to kill, the last to retreat. They are biological aberrations. The depigmentation is caused by the same mutation sequence that increases the adrenal output by roughly 30%, and they live, on average, 40% shorter lives than normally pigmented specimens because their bodies burn themselves out. Keth has been in hegemony custody for 6 years. He was acquired as a juvenile, which means he was raised in controlled conditions, which means the council expected him to be somewhat socialized. He is not. He has killed 4 acquisition handlers. He has killed 2 research animals introduced as prey items. He has killed, in one memorable and thoroughly documented incident, a titanium-framed observation drone that descended into his enclosure at a speed the council classified as non-threatening. The drone cost more than Veth Charon's entire first-year research budget. The council's logic, when they designed the experiment, was not cruel in any way they understood at the time. They knew the albino wolf was the most dangerous specimen in the Hegemony's xenobiology collection. They wanted to understand the relationship between Keth's aggression patterns and external stimuli, specifically whether the presence of a non-threatening biological entity would modulate his threat response or escalate it. They had run this experiment with prey animals. They had run it with other predator species. They had found in each case that Keth simply killed. What they had not tried was a human. The scientific justification was threefold. Humans were the most cognitively complex species the Hegemony had cataloged in this sector. The human's cognitive complexity might provide novel stimuli that could not be replicated by lesser species, and the human's relative physical weakness relative to the wolf would ensure that any behavioral modification they were observing in Keth was genuine rather than threat response. The child was specified not for cruelty, but for a reason that Veth Charon, reviewing the acquisition protocol now, finds almost worse. A child would be more frightened, and a more frightened human would provide cleaner threat stimulus data. She does not say this in the council session either. She pulls up the footage at hour 3, where the experiment begins to go wrong. Keth emerges from the den structure in the western end of the enclosure at 09:22:41 station time. He has been watching the child since she entered. The thermal imaging feed, which the analysts were monitoring in parallel with the optical, shows his heat signature stationary behind the den structure for the first 2 hours and 48 minutes. Watching, processing, not stalking, not territorial, something more focused than either. He emerges into the open space of the enclosure, and the child sees him at almost exactly the same moment he sees her. She is sitting on a boulder near the stream, eating a protein ration she found in a cache concealed under a root system near the east wall. She found the cache in her perimeter survey, 40 minutes in. The cache was placed there deliberately by the research team. The experiment required the child to be alive long enough to generate useful data, but the analysts had assumed she would find it by accident, or not at all, and had planned to make it more visible after the first day if needed. She found it in 40 minutes. She is eating the protein bar when Keth walks out from behind the den structure, and she freezes. He is enormous. The albino coloring makes him look like something from a fever dream, all that white fur against the designed twilight of the enclosure, his eyes a pale amber that seems almost luminescent in the diffuse light. He is 110 centimeters at the shoulder. He weighs, by the most recent measurement, 97 kilograms. His paws leave prints in the soft soil near the stream that are broader than the child's spread hand. He stops when he sees her. She stops when she sees him. For 11 seconds, Veth Charon has counted this 11 times. Neither of them moves. Then the child does something that causes researcher Paul to make a sound that has no equivalent in formal hegemony speech. She breaks the protein bar in half. She holds half of it out toward Keth. Her hand is shaking. The thermal imaging is very clear on this: elevated pulse, elevated body temperature, capillary flush. She is terrified. Anyone reviewing the physiological data can see how terrified she is, and her hand is shaking. And she holds the food out anyway. Keth stares at the hand, then at her face, then at the hand again. He retreats 3 steps. He circles to the north, keeping 40 meters between himself and her position. He does not attack. He circles and watches, and eventually settles into a crouch near the tree line and watches. The child puts the half-protein bar back in her pocket. Into her recorder she says, "There's a wolf in here. He's white, which I didn't know wolves could be. He's really big. I offered him some of my food and he didn't take it, but he also didn't come at me, so that's something. I'm going to call him Ghost." She pauses. Ghost, like in the show. Dad would laugh at that. She clicks off the recorder and goes back to eating. The council is not ready to abort the experiment at hour 3. Council Director Ethan Moule reviews the initial behavior data and concludes that the wolf has not yet committed to an engagement pattern, and that the experiment's primary data collection phase requires a minimum of 12 hours of interaction before meaningful conclusions can be drawn. He notes that the child appears to be in good health and good cognitive function. He uses the phrase, "good cognitive function," and that the experiment should proceed. Veth Charon records her objection formally at 11:00:00 station time. She reviews it now in the observation bay alongside the footage. Her formal objection, read back to her from the council record, sounds thin, technical, the kind of language she had been trained to use that strips the thing you're saying of its actual content. She had said, "The behavioral anomaly at timestamp 09:22:41 suggests the experimental parameters may produce data of a type not anticipated in the original study design, and I formally request a review period before continuing." What she meant was, the child offered the wolf food and the wolf did not attack her, and I don't know what that means, and I think we should find out before we let this continue. The council denied the review request and proceeded. Hour 7. Mara Elkin has built a shelter. This is the thing that breaks the observation bay into genuine, undeniable disorder. Not the food offering, that was unusual, but it could be explained as a panicked, poorly reasoned attempt at appeasement, the kind of behavioral noise you get when any species is terrified and has no good options. But the shelter is different. The shelter is planned. She has located 3 fallen branches. They are real branches, from the real trees, and they fell naturally during the enclosure's growth period, and she has propped them against the largest boulder near the stream in a triangular linta structure. She has filled the gaps with smaller branches, layering them like shingles so that the interior stays drier than the exterior. She has insulated the floor with dry leaves from the root systems near the eastern wall. She has oriented the opening away from the northwest, which is where the recycled air current in the enclosure runs, creating the sensation of prevailing wind. The enclosure's environmental modeling is not classified data, but it is also not publicly available. Nobody told her about the air current. She figured it out. Into her recorder at the point where the shelter is complete, she says, "Day 1 night, I built a shelter. It's not great, but it's dry, and the wolf came and looked at it from the outside for a while and then went away. I think he's trying to figure out what I'm doing. That's okay. I'm trying to figure out what he's doing too." She pauses. "I don't think he wants to eat me. I don't know what he wants. He keeps watching me like he's waiting for me to do something." I'm going to leave some more food out for him tonight and see what happens. She places half of her remaining protein ration. They have given her 2 days' worth, assuming she would not survive to need more, on a flat rock 6 meters from her shelter entrance. Then she goes inside and, if the thermal imaging is to be believed, falls asleep. Ghost eats the food at 02:17:44. He approaches the flat rock, stops 2 meters away, watches it for 4 minutes and then approaches and eats. He does not approach the shelter. He takes the food, moves back to the tree line and eats there, watching the shelter opening. Paul Don's report, filed the following morning, describes this as the most significant behavioral anomaly in 6 years of Keth observation. He is underselling it. Hour 18. Ghost has not attacked. This is the thing the council is now trying to explain. The experiment's projected timeline, based on all prior Keth behavioral data, had estimated a median engagement time of 40 minutes and a maximum survival window of 4 hours, accounting for the possibility of extended stalking behavior. They are at 18 hours. The child is alive, appears healthy, has maintained consistent cognitive function throughout. She updates her recorder every 2 to 3 hours, narrating her observations like the host of a nature documentary. And Ghost is sitting approximately 12 meters from the entrance of her shelter, watching the door. Not stalking. Watching. The distinction is crucial, and the observation bay analysts have had exactly this argument for the last 6 hours. Stalking implies a predator narrowing the distance for a kill. What Ghost is doing is something else. He is maintaining a constant distance. When she moves, he adjusts his position to maintain that distance. When she settled in her shelter for her first sleep, he settled near the entrance and stayed there all night. He is not guarding her. Not exactly. That implies intentionality they cannot verify. But he is also not doing anything else. He is just there. Mara, for her part, speaks to him. This begins around hour 14 and accelerates after. She does not try to touch him, she keeps her distance, mirrors his respect for the space between them, but she talks. Narrates her actions to him the way she narrates them to her recorder. She tells him when she's going to the stream for water so he knows she'll be moving. She tells him when she's found something interesting in the soil near the root systems. Once, she finds what appears to be a beetle in the leaf litter and crouches down to look at it for 5 minutes, and she tells Ghost about the beetle in a low, conversational tone, and Ghost watches her watch the beetle. And none of the 22 analysts in the observation bay know how to log this in the behavioral record. Paul Don starts a new data field, non-transactional communication events. By hour 24, he has logged 37 of them. Day 2 morning. Mara wakes up and immediately checks whether Ghost is still outside her shelter. He is. She sits at the entrance and eats the last of her protein rations and looks at him. He looks back. After a few minutes she says, "You're not what they expected, are you?" She does not mean the council. She does not know about the council. She is saying something else, something more general about expectation and reality. But Veth Karan, watching this for the 7th time, feels the words land with an accuracy that has nothing to do with what the child could possibly know. Ghost shifts, not toward her, not away. He moves to sit at a slightly different angle and his head drops from its alert position to something lower, more relaxed. "Yeah," Mara says. "Same." Into her recorder she says, "Day 2. Ghost stayed outside my shelter all night. I don't know why. I'm going to try to find more food today. I noticed yesterday there are some of those root clusters near the north wall and I think some of them might have something edible. I've seen similar things back home in the woods near our house. Ghost is going to come with me, I think. He follows me everywhere." She clicks the recorder off. Then she stands up, brushes the dirt off her suit, looks at Ghost and says, "Okay, come on then." And she walks north. After 6 seconds, Ghost gets up and follows her. This is the moment 08:33:12 day 2 that Veth Charon identifies as the pivot. Not the food offering, not the shelter, this. Because what Mara Elkin does next is something that the council, reviewing the footage in the session, initially classifies as foraging behavior, and what Veth Charon identifies as something completely different. She leads him. She doesn't lead him the way prey leads a predator, stumbling and panicking, the predator closing the distance in increments. She leads him the way someone who trusts that the other party will follow leads, without looking back too often, without adjusting her pace to accommodate pursuit, without the physiological markers of flight. Her heart rate is slightly elevated. Her cortisol levels, as read by the suit's embedded biosensors, are higher than baseline but lower than the readings from hour 1. She is still scared. But she is moving through the fear the way you move through weather, acknowledging it, adjusting for it, not stopping. She finds the root cluster. She crouches down, excavates carefully with her fingers, and unearths what appear to be dense, calorie-rich tubers the botanical team had planted as part of the enclosure's ecosystem. She sniffs one carefully, licks it, waits, sniffs again, takes a very small bite and waits another 5 minutes before eating any more. She identifies 3 of the species as potentially edible by this method. Then she puts the others aside and looks at Ghost. Ghost is watching. She holds one out toward him, flat palm, the same posture as the protein bar, but steadier now, less shaking. She has done this before, knows how it goes. Ghost approaches, stops 3 meters away, lowers his head to the tuber, sniffs it. He takes it. He eats it. He does not retreat to the tree line this time. He sits 3 meters away and watches her finish her own meal. Mara says into her recorder without any particular drama, "He ate from my hand today. Well, almost from my hand. Close enough." Click. The council calls for an emergency session at hour 31. Keth Ghost has not attacked in 31 hours. He has taken food on 3 occasions. He has maintained proximity to the child through 1 complete sleep cycle and has positioned himself between her and the enclosure's western entrance, the primary access point, in what the behavioral analysts describe, with considerable hedging in their language, as potentially protective positioning. Veth Charon does not hedge. She stands in the session chamber, with the footage cued on the display behind her, and she says what she has been trying to find diplomatic language for since hour 18. "We have made a category error," she says. The council waits. "We designed this experiment to study the wolf," she says. "We put a human child in the enclosure to provide stimulus data for the wolf's behavior. But we have been studying the wrong subject." Director Ethan Moule says. Researcher Veth Charon, the experimental parameters were clearly. "The child is running a counter-experiment," Veth Charon says. The chamber goes quiet. "She doesn't know that's what she's doing," Veth Charon says. "She has no concept of our observation. She has no access to the behavioral literature on Keth's attack history, or any reason to believe that the wolf she is naming Ghost should have killed her 18 hours ago. She is simply doing what she knows how to do. And what she knows how to do at 8 years old in captivity, with no resources, is observe, adapt, build, and connect." She turns and plays the footage from 08:33:12. The root cluster, the flat palm, the wolf taking food. "We have 6 years of Keth data," she says. "We have documentation of every entity he has encountered in that time. 41 prey animals, 6 handler casualties, 11 research drones, 2 competing predator species introduced for behavioral comparison. None of them survived 40 minutes. She pauses. This child is on hour 31. Hour 40. Mara is sleeping. Ghost is curled at the entrance to her shelter. Not near the entrance, at it. His body across the threshold, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed in that shallow alert rest state that the behavioral file identifies as reduced threat perception. He is not guarding in the formal sense. He is simply present. He has chosen to be exactly there in exactly that position. Vethkaran watches this on the thermal feed. She cannot sleep. She has been in the observation bay for 40 hours. Paul Don is beside her, running comparative analysis against every behavioral file in the Hegemony's Xenobiology archive. "There's nothing like this," he says after a long while. "No," she says. "I've cross-referenced against every large predator species we've cataloged in this sector," he says, "against bonding behavior in social pack animals, against juvenile rearing behavior in maternal predator species." He pulls up a graph that Vethkaran cannot make sense of at this hour. "I keep getting the same result." Which is, there's no biological framework that explains what's happening. If the child were displaying submissive prey behavior, the wolf should have attacked. If she were displaying territorial behavior, he should have escalated. She's not doing either of those things. He turns from the screen. She's doing something that doesn't have a name in our behavioral taxonomy. Vethkaran watches the thermal feed, the curl of the wolf's body across the threshold, the small heat signature of the child inside, steady and breathing. "What's the closest analog you found?" she asks. He is quiet for a moment. "Pack formation," he says. "Specifically, the early bonding stage when a juvenile is introduced to an adult pack member, and the adult decides to adopt rather than eliminate." He pauses. "The closest analog is family." Hour 52. The council issues a termination order. This is not cruelty, or at least, it is not understood as cruelty by the council members who vote for it. It is, in their framing, scientific necessity. The experiment has generated anomalous data that falls outside all predictive models, which means the experimental parameters are compromised, which means the data is uninterpretable, which means the experiment must be reset. Reset is the word in the termination order. Vethkaran reads the termination order and then reads it again, making sure she understands what *reset means. She has been in this division long enough to know that language in formal council orders is precise. Reset means the enclosure is cleared. The experimental subjects are removed. The experiment is redesigned based on the anomalous data. Removed * is also precise language. She files a counter-petition within 4 minutes of receiving the termination order. She flags it to every researcher in her division. She copies it to the Xenobiology Ethics Subcommittee, which has not convened in 3 years because there has been nothing to call them for. Then she does something she has never done in 14 years of research. She goes to the enclosure herself. The maintenance corridors that run behind the enclosure's wall systems are not designed for comfortable navigation. They are narrow and poorly lit, and they smell of the climate control coolant used to maintain the enclosure's weather simulation. Vethkaran moves through them faster than she should, her footfalls too loud, and she does not think carefully about what she is doing because if she thinks carefully she will stop. She reaches the emergency access panel at the eastern wall, the one the research team uses when they need to introduce materials into the enclosure without using the main entrance, and she overrides the lock with her research clearance. The lock is rated for research clearance. She notes, filing this detail away, that it should not be. She steps into the enclosure. It is hour 52 station time. The enclosure's light cycle is in its simulated dusk, amber diffuse, the recorded wind cycling through its 11-minute pattern. The trees are casting long shadows across the stream. She finds them near the shelter, which Mara has expanded and improved over the course of 2 days. The girl is sitting on the flat boulder near the stream, cleaning her hands in the water. Ghost is 12 meters away, drinking downstream. Veth Charon does not know human languages. This is a professional failure she has not thought about until exactly this moment. She stands at the edge of the tree line, and the child looks up and sees her, and they regard each other for a long moment. Then Mara reaches into her sleeve and holds up the recorder. She says something. Veth Charon's translation implant takes a moment to resolve it. That comes through as, "Are you from the people who put me in here?" Veth Charon says, in words she has to think carefully to construct, "Yes." The child looks at her for a moment. Then she looks at Ghost, who has stopped drinking and is watching Veth Charon with an alert stillness that Veth Charon has seen in 41 hours of footage and knows, from the data, means something specific. Ghost is not in attack posture. He is in the alert presence posture he has held for 40 hours, positioned between Mara and the perceived source of uncertainty, head low, body angled, not aggressive, watchful, the posture of an animal that has decided something is worth protecting. Mara says, "He won't let you hurt me." Veth Charon says, "I know." The child studies her face. Human facial reading, she knows from the literature, is extraordinarily fine-grained, and she finds this unnerving in the way that being seen clearly by something unexpected is always unnerving. "Are you the one trying to get me out?" Mara asks. Veth Charon does not ask how she knows there is someone trying to get her out. She doesn't have the translation precision for that conversation. She says, "Yes." Mara stands. She cups water in her hands and drinks. Then she says, "Is Ghost coming?" Veth Charon had not thought about this. She thinks about it now. "Yes," she says. The council is informed of the extraction at hour 53. When Veth Charon submits the formal incident report that she is required to file whenever a researcher enters an active enclosure without prior authorization. The report is 8 paragraphs long. 7 of them are procedural. The 8th is not. The subject, designated Keth Alpha, demonstrates clear behavioral modification, consistent with pack bonding protocols, in response to sustained non-threatening interaction with a juvenile human subject over approximately 50 hours. This behavioral modification cannot be reversed by reintroduction of prior experimental conditions without causing unacceptable harm to both subjects. The experimental data generated by this interaction exceeds in value any data that could be obtained by continuing the experiment under the original parameters. I am therefore terminating the experiment and requesting immediate reassignment of both subjects to long-term behavioral study under naturalistic conditions. The child's name is Mara Elkin. She is 8 years old. She is from a planet called Earth, in the 3rd orbital position of a yellow dwarf star in a system the hegemony has not yet formally catalogued. I recommend formal cataloging. She has been in the enclosure for 52 hours and 11 minutes. During that time, she built a shelter, identified edible food sources, mapped the environmental systems of the enclosure from observation, maintained consistent psychological function under sustained extreme stress, and domesticated the most aggressive specimen in the hegemony's xenobiology collection. She did this with a child's recorder, some protein rations, and what I can only describe as an extraordinary human capacity for deciding that the terrifying thing in front of her deserved patience. I would like to recommend to the Council that we reconsider the entirety of our assessment of the human species. The Council session, in its final hour, is quieter than Veth Charon expected. She plays the footage from hour 52. Mara emerging from the enclosure, blinking in the corridor light. Ghost padding beside her, his shoulder at her hip height, close enough that she can keep a hand resting on his back without reaching. The way Mara's hand found that position without thought, fingers curled into white fur, and Ghost's stride neither accelerating nor deflecting, simply accepting the touch the way you accept something that has already become ordinary. The Council watches. "She's going home," Director Ethan Moule says, It is not entirely a question. Yes, Vethkaron says, with the wolf. The wolf is hegemony property. The wolf, Vethkaron says, will not leave her. She plays the footage from when the extraction team tried to separate them in the corridor. Keth's sudden, total shift from the low-alert watchfulness to something else, not rage precisely, not the blind fury of the four handler casualties, but a focused, controlled, absolute declaration. The sound he made, the way the extraction team stepped back, the way Mara put her hand on his back and said, in that low conversational tone she'd used since hour 14, "It's okay. It's okay, Ghost. They're going to fix it." And the way the wolf settled. Because she told him to. There are 63 solar systems in this sector that we have catalogued and not yet made contact with, Vethkaron says to the Council. 41 of them have species in the third or fourth developmental tier. We have, in every case, approached those cataloging decisions with the assumption that we understand the threat profile of the species we are encountering. She looks at the frozen frame on the screen, Mara's hand in the white fur, Ghost's pale amber eyes forward, alert, present. We had 6 years of data on Keth, she says. We knew exactly what he was. We had documents, files, incident reports. We were certain. She pauses. We were wrong about the wolf because we didn't account for the child. We will be wrong about the humans in exactly the same way, at much greater scale, if we don't adjust our models now. What is your recommendation? Says Director Ethan Moole. Vethkaron thinks of Mara sitting on the boulder with her recorder, narrating a beetle. Thinks of Ghost at the threshold. Thinks of 52 hours of footage that she has watched 40+ times and still does not fully understand, because full understanding would require her to have been raised in a species that treats the terrifying unknown as a patient friendship waiting to happen. Full contact protocol, she says, formal cataloging, return of all acquired specimens. She looks at the Council, and an apology, in whatever form they will accept it. The Council is quiet for a long time. An apology, Ethan Moole says. Yes. To a species we haven't made official contact with. Yes. Because a child taught a wolf not to be afraid of her. Because a child taught a wolf not to be afraid of her, Vethkaron says. And because if we are going to be wrong about the humans, I would rather be wrong in a direction that doesn't end in a war we cannot win. There is a moment in the footage, hour 29, in the quiet before Mara's second sleep, that Vethkaron keeps returning to in a way she cannot entirely explain. The enclosure is dim. The ambient wind is on its 11-minute cycle. Ghost is in his position at the shelter threshold. Mara is inside, cross-legged on her insulated leaf floor, holding the recorder in both hands. She has been talking to it for a minute, updating her log, narrating the day with that precise, methodical calm that Vethkaron has come to recognize as not the absence of fear but its mastered form, and then she stops. She sits with the recorder in her lap. After a long while she says, I don't know if anyone's ever going to hear this, but in case they do, I want to say something. She looks at the recorder lens. I was really scared when I got here. I'm still scared, but I've been thinking about something my dad told me once. He said that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared and you keep going anyway, and you look for something to be kind to because that's how you find out if the world you're in is worth staying in. She pauses. I think the world I'm in might be worth staying in. She clicks the recorder off. Ghost shifts at the threshold. His amber eyes, barely visible in the low light, are open. He has been listening. Whether he understands in any formal sense is a question the behavioral literature cannot answer, but he has been listening. Vethkaron has watched this moment 46 times. She plays it one more time in the empty observation bay, after the council session has ended and the orders have been filed and the transport has been authorized. Mara Elkin will be home in 14 station days. She will arrive with a white wolf who will not leave her side, and the story will be told and retold in human records long after the girl has grown into something the galaxy has not yet imagined, and long after the wolf named Ghost has lived his short, incandescent life beside her. What happened in the enclosure will be studied for decades by researchers on both sides of the contact boundary, each of them trying to locate the precise moment when the experiment became something else. They will not find a precise moment. That is the thing about humans. The change is never a single point. It is an accumulation, small kindnesses laid one on top of another, food offered on a shaking hand, a name given to a feared thing, a patient willingness to let the silence last as long as it needs to last. The change is already complete before anyone has noticed it is happening. Vethkaran files her final report, turns off the display, and walks to the transport bay. She has an apology to help draft. She finds, to her surprise, that she is looking forward to it. In the formal records of the Hegemony Xenobiology Division, the incident is catalogued as Enclosure Trial 7 Keth Alpha, status, anomalous, outcome, terminated, reassigned. There is a behavioral note attached to the file that Paul Don wrote and Vethkaran countersigned. It reads, "The human child designated Maroi demonstrated behavioral patterns consistent with immediate adoption of environmental survey, threat-neutral engagement, resource sharing, non-transactional communication, and interspecies trust building. These behaviors were displayed consistently from hour 1 to hour 52, under conditions of genuine and extreme physical threat, without external instruction or prior knowledge of the experimental subject's behavioral history." The most significant finding of this trial is not that the human survived. It is that the wolf, in 52 hours, forgot what it was supposed to do. We believe the humans have been doing this for a very long time. 3 weeks after Mara Elkin returns to Earth, Vethkaran submits a supplementary research report that the Council does not request and does not immediately know what to do with. It is not about Keth. It is not about the enclosure experiment or the behavioral anomaly or the 72 hours of footage she has now reviewed in their entirety 14 additional times. It is, formally, a species assessment document, the kind of broad synthesizing document that gets produced at the beginning of a new contact classification, when the hegemony is trying to decide what tier to assign a newly cataloged species and what protocols should govern the relationship. It runs 412 pages. The Council has never received a species assessment document that ran 412 pages. The standard template is 60. The longest prior document in the division's history was 107, and that covered a species with hive mind governance, 3 distinct biological sexes, and a planetary orbit that made communication impossible for 8 months out of every 12. The humans get 412. Paul Don reads the first 100 pages over 2 days and sends Vethkaran a message that says only, "I think you may have made a mistake." She replies, "Which one?" He writes back, "You've undersold them in section 44, the part about their relationship with time." She revises section 44. The supplementary report opens with a question. It is not a rhetorical question. It is the question that Vethkaran has been trying to answer since hour 3 of the enclosure trial, and she still does not have a clean answer, which is why she is asking it formally in a research document. What does it mean for a species to be domesticated? The Hegemony's Xenobiology Division has a working definition. It has been used for approximately 200 years. It is precise and well-sourced, and it deals primarily with the biological and behavioral changes that occur in a species through selective breeding and sustained human-adjacent living. The division has applied it to 46 species in this sector, and it has always worked well. The definition does not account for the humans. Because the humans, Veth Caron writes, are not themselves domesticated. They are the domesticators. They are the species that took a predator, and not just any predator, but one of the apex land predators of their homeworld, an animal that competed with them for food sources, that was large enough and fast enough and strong enough to kill them easily, that was territorial and pack-governed and instinctively aggressive to non-pack members, and over a period of tens of thousands of years, turned it into something that sleeps in their beds. They did this, as far as the paleobiological record can reconstruct, with patience and food. They did this without any biological mechanism the hegemony science can identify. There was no pheromone adaptation that made wolves more likely to accept human proximity. There was no toxin, no sonic signal, no chemical message that human biology sent to wolf biology saying we are safe. There was nothing in the system except repeated exposure and offered food and the accumulated weight of countless small moments. A child sitting near a wolf that didn't attack, a wolf coming closer to a fire because the warmth was there. Generations of this, centuries, until the behavior became biology and the biology became the animal we now call *dog. An animal that, in its current form, monitors human emotional states, guides blind humans through cities, detects disease, guards human children, and grieves when humans die. The humans did not engineer this. They did not plan it. They simply kept being kind to a dangerous thing, until the dangerous thing forgot to be dangerous. And they have done it again, Veth Caron writes, in 52 hours, with the most aggressive specimen in our collection, without knowing anything about its history, with nothing but a child's recorder and the habit of patience. She pauses in her writing for a long moment before adding the next line. I do not believe this was exceptional behavior for a human child. I believe it was ordinary behavior that we misidentified as exceptional, because we had no context for what ordinary human behavior looks like when applied to the apparently impossible. The Xenobiology Division's archive has, because Veth Caron spent 3 weeks requesting it from every acquisition team that had documented Earth prior to the official Mara Elkin incident, a remarkable amount of footage from the human homeworld. Survey footage mostly. Passive observation collected by long-range probes, the kind of documentation that gets filed and rarely reviewed because the species in question hasn't been contact classified yet, and there's no operational reason to study them closely. Hours and hours of footage of human settlements, human agriculture, human infrastructure. And because the probe's environmental coverage was broad, hours and hours of footage of humans with animals. Veth Caron watches all of it. She watches a human child smaller than Mara Elkin approach a draft animal the size of a small ground vehicle, reach up to its jaw with both hands, and press her face against its nose. The animal, whose kick could break the child's bones without apparent effort, does nothing. It lowers its head further into the contact. She watches a human male, elderly by the proportions of the species, sitting in a wooden chair in an outdoor space, while 3 large dogs occupy the same chair with him, distributed across his lap and shoulders in a configuration that should be physically inconvenient for everyone involved. All of them are visibly relaxed. She watches a human teenager sit cross-legged on a floor while a small feline predator, the domestic version of what is, in its wild form, a capable killer, walks across her keyboard and sits on her hands, and she laughs and lets it. She watches a human family at a body of water, and a large bird, a species the environmental file identifies as potentially aggressive during breeding season, walk directly up to a human male's outstretched hand and eat from it. She watches 50 hours of this footage in 4 days. Then she adds a chapter to the supplementary report titled, What We Are Looking At When We Look at Them. It reads, the hegemony's initial contact assessment of the human species placed them in Tier 4, technological early, with a projected contact window of approximately 200 standard years. The assessment was based on their technological development curve, their resource extraction patterns, and their species-level conflict data, which is extensive and in many respects alarming. I am not here to argue that the conflict data is wrong. The humans are capable of extraordinary violence against each other and have exercised that capacity throughout their documented history. This is real data, and it should not be minimized. However, I am here to argue that the Tier 4 assessment has made an analytical error that I believe is common in the hegemony species classification methodology. It has mistaken the conflict data for the primary characteristic of the species, when in fact, the conflict data and the bonding data are two expressions of the same underlying characteristic. The humans care extraordinarily intensely about things. Everything they do flows from this. Their conflicts are intense because they care intensely. Their grief is acute because they care intensely. Their art, and they produce more art per capita than any species the division has cataloged in this sector, is an expression of how much they care. Their relationship with other species on their homeworld, including those species that would kill them if given the opportunity, is an expression of how much they care. A species capable of the attachment patterns we observed in Enclosure Trial 7 Keth Alpha is not a Tier 4 contact candidate. It is something the hegemony's tiering system was not designed to account for. What do you do with a species that will, given time and proximity, try to befriend everything it encounters? I think we need to find out. The formal contact mission launches 8 months later. Veth Caron is not on the mission team. She is not a diplomat and she is not trained for first contact procedures, and she is, if she is being honest, not certain she could maintain the professional detachment that first contact protocols require, given that she has spent 8 months building a detailed emotional relationship with a species she has never met. But she is in the observation bay when the contact vessel enters Earth's orbital band and makes first transmission. And she is in the observation bay with Paul Don, with most of the division's senior staff, with the council director who asked for a recommendation and acted on it, when the human government responds. The response takes 7 minutes, which, given that the humans have just been informed that they are not alone in the universe, is fast. The response is formal in its first part. Acknowledgement of signal, request for verification of intelligence, standard protocol-adjacent language that someone on the human side clearly generated quickly from existing first contact contingency documentation. The second part of the response is less formal. It is a question. We understand this communication is from a non-human intelligence. We want to ask, before we proceed further, are you the same people who took one of our children? The contact team's lead diplomat looks at the camera link for a long moment. Then she says, yes. Another 7 minutes. Then the response comes back. She says to tell you that Ghost is doing great. She also says she'd like to come back, if that's okay. The observation bay does not erupt. It is too surprised to erupt. It is a room full of researchers who have spent careers learning to observe without reacting, and for about 15 seconds, everyone in it exercises that training. Then Paul Don says, in the tone of someone reading a diagnostic result he has checked 4 times and still cannot fully credit, she wants to come back. Yes, Veth Caron says. To the place where we. Yes. He is quiet for a moment. That is either the bravest thing I've ever heard, he says, or the most human thing I've ever heard. I don't think those are different things, Veth Caron says. Mara Elkin comes back 11 months after she left. She is 9 years old by then. She has grown 3 centimeters. She comes with her father, who has the look of a man who said asterisk, absolutely not asterisk, 17 times, and then agreed to the thing he said absolutely not to, which is a look Veth Caron is now able to read on human faces with some fluency. Ghost is with her. This required, on the logistical side, a level of negotiation that Veth Caron does not intend to document in full, because it reflects poorly on everyone involved, including herself. The short version is that Ghost was not in a condition to be returned to the wild and could not be housed at a standard facility, and had made it clear, in the non-verbal but extremely emphatic way he made most things clear, that he was not going to be separated from Mara under any circumstances. So he traveled with her, in a specially designed transport module, with a cooling system that Pauldon stayed up 2 nights designing, and that Ghost scratched decorative grooves into within the first 3 hours. Mara thinks the scratches are an improvement. The first session of what will become the formal contact program, the first of several hundred hours of structured interaction between human representatives and the hegemony's research and diplomatic teams, begins in a conference room that Veth Caron's team has decorated with real plants from Earth, sourced through the contact mission's cargo manifest, and arranged by Pauldon with careful reference to the survey footage. Mara sits across the table from Veth Caron. Ghost is beside her chair, his chin on the table, looking at Veth Caron with those pale amber eyes that Veth Caron has spent 8 months reviewing on footage and is now, for the first time, seeing in person. Joel Elkin, the father, the red truck, the human who said absolutely not, sits beside his daughter and does not say anything for the first 2 minutes. He is looking around the room the way Mara looked around the enclosure on day 1, methodically, cataloging, filing. Veth Caron says, through the translation system the contact team has spent 6 months developing. Mara, I want to begin by saying something I should have said before you left. Mara looks at her. I'm sorry, Veth Caron says, for what we did. Mara is quiet for a moment. Then she says, okay. It is, Veth Caron will note in her journal later that night she has started keeping one, which is unusual for a researcher and which she would find difficult to explain to any colleague who asked, not a dismissal. It is not a forgiveness. It is something in between. An acknowledgement that the apology was received and that the conversation can now continue. I have questions, Mara says. I expected you would, Veth Caron says. Can I ask them in whatever order? Yes. Okay. Mara folds her hands on the table in a gesture that Veth Caron has catalogued across dozens of hours of human footage as a preparation gesture, a physical settling of the self before beginning something. First question, why an enclosure? Why not just talk to me? Veth Caron looks at her for a long moment. We didn't think you could talk to us in any meaningful way, she says. We believed your species was too early in its cognitive development. Mara processes this. You thought I was too dumb. We thought your species was too limited, not you specifically. But you put a child in, not an adult. Yes. Why? Veth Caron pauses. Because a child would generate stronger fear responses. We were studying the wolf, not the child. Joel Elkin makes a sound. Veth Caron has spent enough time with the translated footage to identify this as a human male exercising significant restraint. Mara looks at her father, then back at Veth Caron. I figured that out, she says, on day 1. That the experiment wasn't about me. Yes, Veth Caron says, the footage shows that. So instead of being scared, I decided to run my own experiment. Yes, Veth Caron says, the footage shows that too. A small pause, then Mara says, what was your result? We're still analyzing, Veth Caron says. We expect to be analyzing for some time. This seems to satisfy something in Mara. She reaches under the table and puts her hand on Ghost's back. He shifts slightly, settling against her leg, and she looks around the room at the potted plants, the carefully sourced earth soil in the planter boxes, the amber-toned lighting that someone on the design team had calibrated to match the survey footage of the Montana autumn light. You tried to make it feel like home, she says. Yes, Veth Caron says. "You're getting better at it," Mara says. "The light is almost right." There is, at this point, a pause of approximately 6 seconds. And then Veth Caron does something she has not done in the course of a professional session in 14 years of research. Because she is not someone who expresses things in professional sessions that do not belong there. She laughs. The supplementary report is published internally 18 months after the enclosure trial. It is eventually, after significant debate within the council, also published externally, made available to the broader hegemony research community, which is a decision that takes 2 years and 3 votes, and that Veth Caron does not expect to win until it happens. The final section of the report is short. It is only 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph describes what the division now knows about human bonding behavior across species, based on the Earth survey footage, and the contact program's first 18 months of structured interaction. The second paragraph describes what the division suspects but cannot yet verify, which is that the human capacity for interspecies attachment is not a quirk or an outlier of human psychology, but is central to what made the human species what it is, that the dog and the horse and the cat and the 100 other species that share the human world are not incidental companions, but co-architects of the human civilization, and that any accurate model of what humans are must include what they have built with the other minds around them. The third paragraph is not scientific. It is something Veth Caron wrote and revised 17 times and finally kept, because she could not find a more precise version. When the child entered the enclosure, the experiment was designed to end in one way. The wolf was the most dangerous specimen we had. The child had nothing. The outcome was supposed to be predictable. It was not predictable. Not because the child was exceptional, not because the wolf was different from what we thought, but because we were thinking about the problem in entirely the wrong way. We asked, what will the wolf do to the child? The right question, the question the child was asking from the moment she walked in was, what can I do with the wolf? This is the thing we did not understand about them. They do not look at a dangerous world and ask how to survive it. They look at a dangerous world and ask how to make it theirs. They have been asking that question for 40,000 years, and the answers are sitting in every home on their planet. A wolf become a dog, a wild horse become a companion, a wild bird become a pet, 1,000 dangerous things become beloved. We put a child in a room with the fiercest thing we had. She named it Ghost, and it learned to follow her home. I think we should pay attention to that. There is a coda to the story that never makes it into any formal record. It happens on Mara's last day of the first contact visit. The 9th day, after the structured sessions are complete and the diplomatic protocols have been signed, and the data-sharing agreements have been drafted, and the translators are exhausted, and everyone on both sides of the table has been talking for so long that the language is starting to blur at the edges. Veth Caron finds Mara in the observation bay. She has no idea how Mara found the observation bay. The observation bay is not on the public access list for visiting human delegates. It is down 2 corridors from the conference rooms, through a junction that requires research clearance to access, and there are no signs. It is not a place anyone should wander into accidentally. Mara is standing in front of the main display, which is showing the enclosure footage. Not the analyzed segments, not the curated clips that had been shown in the council sessions. The raw footage, time-stamped, playing in real time from the beginning. The moment the door opened, and the small girl in the oversized gray suit stepped inside and stopped and looked up at the artificial canopy. Ghost is beside her. He is watching the screen with the same amber attention he gives most things. Whether he recognizes himself in the footage, whether the concept of a recorded image has any meaning to a wolf, is a question the behavioral literature still does not have a clean answer to. Mara hears Veth Caron come in. She doesn't turn around. I wanted to see what it looked like from out here, she says. Vethkaran stands beside her and they both watch the screen for a while. The girl on the screen is checking the walls, running her hand along the surface, finding the seams. She looks older than 8 in the footage, in the way that frightened children trying to function often look older than they are. We've all watched it a lot, Vethkaran says. There are 22 researchers in this division, and I think the average is somewhere over 40 viewings each. What are you looking for? Mara asks. The moment, Vethkaran says. We keep thinking there must be a single moment when it changed, when he decided. Mara watches the screen for a while longer. The girl on the screen has found the ventilation grill and is crouching in front of it, listening. There isn't one, Mara says. No, Vethkaran says. We're beginning to understand that. It was just, Mara pauses, thinking. She has the thinking pause quality that Vethkaran has begun to associate with humans who are being careful with language, who are trying to say the exact right thing. It was just all of it, all the little things. I kept being there and I kept not being a threat and I kept offering him things and at some point she shrugs. He just decided I was his. Ghost shifts slightly, presses the side of his head against Mara's hip. She puts her hand in his fur without looking down, automatic, the same gesture the survey footage showed in 100 variations across 100 households. That's how it always works, she says. You can't make them decide. You just have to keep showing up and let them figure it out themselves. She turns and looks at Vethkaran. It's the same with people, she says. I think, I'm only 9, so maybe I'm wrong. Vethkaran looks at the screen. The girl from 8 months ago, working methodically through an impossible situation, naming a wolf and offering him half her food and sitting near him when she was afraid and talking to him about beetles. I don't think you're wrong, Vethkaran says. They stand together for a few more minutes, watching the footage. The girl on the screen has started building her shelter. The wolf has not appeared yet. Then Mara says, "Can I have a copy of it, the footage?" Vethkaran looks at her. "It's mine too, isn't it?" Mara says. "It's footage of me, I should have a copy." Vethkaran thinks through the applicable regulations quickly, technically correct. Under the new data sharing agreements, the humans have access to all acquisition-related materials pertaining to their citizens. The footage is acquisition-related material. The footage is pertaining to a human citizen. Yes, Vethkaran says. I'll have a copy prepared before your transport. Good, Mara says. She turns back to the screen. I want to show Dad. He keeps asking me what it was like and I don't always have the words. But I think if he watches it, she stops. He'll understand, Vethkaran says. Yeah. They watch the screen for another minute. The girl has gone still near the eastern wall, listening to the ventilation grill. She has that look, that quality of deep, concentrated attention that Vethkaran has come to recognize as one of the most distinctly human things she has observed. A child, scared and alone in an alien space, stopping to listen to the air. You know what the weirdest thing is, Mara says. What? I wasn't that scared after the first few hours. I mean, I was, but not, she stops again, finding the word. Not the way I thought I would be. Being scared got easier because I had stuff to do. And then when Ghost showed up, it got even easier because I had someone to think about besides myself. She looks at the screen. That's the thing about being in a hard place. You can't just sit there and be scared. You have to make it yours. You have to find the thing that's worth paying attention to. Ghost makes a low sound, not quite a vocalization, more of a settling, a contented exhale. Mara smiles. It is the smile of someone who has said something correctly. He agrees, she says. The copy of the footage is prepared and transferred to the Elkin family archive before the transport departs. Vethkaran is in the bay when the transport clears the orbital band. She watches the trajectory signature on the navigation display, until it becomes too small to distinguish from background data. Then she turns back to her desk, where the supplementary report is still open on the display, the cursor blinking at the end of the final paragraph. She has been thinking for 3 weeks about whether the report needs a postscript. It is already 412 pages. It may not need more. But there is one thing she has not said, and she thinks, having spent a morning in the observation bay with a 9-year-old girl and a wolf, that it is the most important thing. She adds it now. Postscript on the question of threat assessment. The standard species threat assessment protocol asks, how capable is this species of causing harm? The human's answer to this question is significant. They are more capable than many species we have contact classified before their technological development reached the level we typically consider threshold. They are aggressive, competitive, and historically prone to conflict. The record is clear on this. But the threat assessment protocol was not designed to ask a second question. How capable is this species of extending trust? I have spent 8 months reviewing the human record. I have also spent 8 months watching a wolf who killed 4 members of our staff sleep across the threshold of a child's shelter, for no reason that any of our behavioral models can adequately explain, except that the child asked him to stay. We have been asking the wrong question about the humans. They are not primarily a threat to be assessed. They are primarily a species that is looking for something to take care of. Everything they have, their civilization, their technology, their art, their animals, was built from that impulse. They take the dangerous thing and they figure out how to love it, and in the loving, they change it, and in the changing, they change themselves. We have spent 3 years in their orbital neighborhood, watching them from a distance, assessing their threat profile. We have not introduced ourselves because we were not certain they were ready. I would like to suggest that the uncertainty runs in both directions. The humans have been ready. They have been ready for quite a long time. They have been ready since the first human child sat near the first wolf and offered it something to eat. They have been waiting for us to show up. I think we owe them the courtesy of showing up well.